Morning, folks. Morning. Keep coming. So, Durgesh, Gaitonde, I've been within the cyber industry for just over 20 years now, working along with Rory in Tesco Bank as the cyber risk manager. Again, look after the Chartered Institute up here in Scotland, and also responsible for one of the work streams within diversity and inclusion, along with many other initiatives. So I'll just pass over to Grant for introduction.
Yeah, cool. So it's Grant Cairns. I'm between the three of us, the baby of the family with only 15 years in the industry. So I work within the second line risk team with Durgesh and Rory at Tesco Bank, and I'm leading one of the D&I work streams for CIISec on disabilities specifically.
Grand. So title is Diversity and Inclusivity, Inclusion in Cybersecurity. It'll be something that everyone is obviously aware of, but the scale of it, the scope of what we can do is perhaps one of the big challenges we have. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Very quickly, the Chartered Institute of Information Security, founded 2006 as the Institute of Information Security Professionals, grown, achieved its Royal Charter a couple of years back, headquartered in London, but has branches across the UK and has involvement across other countries as well. Number of areas where it looks to improve individual competency, capability, professionalism, and for organisations. Number of resources available to members. So I'm not going to go into this, but available to look at on the website. Associate Development Programme, which is absolutely key for new members into the industry, folks looking to get certification. A lot of resources around roles and career planning. So we use them in Tesco Bank. I've used them in other organisations I've worked with. And what we are going to talk about today is on the Inclusion by Design work stream. This one, and I'll hand over in a second to the guys on this, got a number of topics. It obviously doesn't cover everything within diversity and inclusiveness, but a good subset of areas where we can make a definite improvement now. We can start to look at the benefits, the actions that we need to put in place to bring the industry into where it should be. Future state is much greater equality and inclusiveness. So that's the kind of background to what the chaps are going to talk about now. I'll hand over to Durgesh.
Sorry.
There we go. Only want to hold one thing. So you're getting kind of the really, really early scoop on this. The presentation that we're doing today was intended for Scot-Secure Glasgow in 6 months' time, but we brought it forward because there was a gap here. So you're kind of getting the who we are, what we want to do, and how we want to go about it presentation, as opposed to what we've actually done so far. So the good news is that we're right at the early stages. The bad news is you're now locked in and you don't get to leave unless you sign up to help. So there's no way out now. But yeah, I'm really, really proud about this first slide. I am the first person that gets to put this up on the screen in the event so far. We've all seen that, and I get to put it up for the first time. So. This is there, it's the trope that normally comes out every time we talk about cybersecurity, when we need to make the cyber bogeyman on the TV or in the press, or we need to talk about threat actors, the boards and whatnot, but we never really think about what's actually behind that mask or behind the hoodie or inside the hoodie. And the reality is, there's no barriers to entry if you're the bad guy. There we go. FBI's most wanted list. Now granted, it's not exactly the full picture of diversity. There's a bit of a gender disparity here, right? But the one thing that we'll call out about this is that the only thing you need to make it onto this list is a set of skills, right? As I said, there's no barriers to stop somebody from getting in. It doesn't matter who you are, what your background is, what your disability status is, your LGBTQ status, it's irrelevant. There's no barriers, you can go for it, you can get involved. So if you've got the right skills to do that, then why is it not the case that we're exactly the same within the cyber industry? Why can you just not let people in? And the issue is around kind of barriers and how people can approach those early jobs. So we've all seen all the stuff around D&I. I think everybody will have seen presentations about it before. You'll have read articles and various newsletters that will come out. There's no argument, there's no debate really about the fact that having a diverse workforce working for you helps you become more effective as an organisation and in turn lead to more profit for the company that you're working for. But the interesting thing about this is that if we want to think about diversity and inclusion, what I want to talk about first is, and I'm leading the disability side of things, I'm going to lean on that one a little bit heavily for the start of this, and talk a little bit first off around the different models of disability that you can look at, because they translate quite well to the other facets that were in that diagram about D&I. So there's the medical model of disability and the social model of disability. The medical model of disability is there's something wrong with that person that means they're in a wheelchair and they can't do some things. They can't get on the train. Social model of disability says the train station has been badly designed to cater for everyone who might want to get on and off a train. So there's a barrier there because of a bad design approach, and the concept that we want to get through with all the D&I work streams in CIISec is trying to level that and design the entry to the industry and progression through the industry to allow everyone, regardless of their D&I status, to be able to achieve whatever accreditations or whatever kind of job promotions that they want to get through as they go through. So, perfect example of it. If you have a sight impairment, right? If you want to use your online banking, there are methods that have been put in place that mean that if you are blind, you don't need to do the facial recognition scan on your phone to authorize a transaction. You don't need to look at the screen and blink your eyes and make sure your face is inside the oval shape. There are other mechanisms for you to go through to authorize a transaction for your online banking. But if you want to get into the cybersecurity field, if you want to get your first qualifications and accreditations, how many of you have seen, for example, the CISM review manual written in Braille? No? Okay, so if we think about people who are deaf, it's another good example. They'll have learned British Sign Language from when they were a young age. They'll be completely fluent in it. It will be their first language. But the syntax for BSL is very, very different to spoken English. If you wanted to think about it in translation, I speak a little bit of German, so I can say that if I wanted to say I haven't spoken German since high school, if I say that in German and translate it back, syntax is different. It would be, I haven't German since high school spoken. That would be the sentence structure that we put together. That's what reading any sort of training material for anyone, even at high school, is going to look like in terms of trying to pick up even CIISec's early stage stuff like the Cyber EPQ and trying to pick up the initial skills that they might want to use to get into the industry. We want to get to a point where we've addressed that, leveled the playing field to make sure that different people with different skills, different backgrounds, don't face that type of barrier and that type of problem with being able to understand what is effectively and becomes very, very complicated material further up. I mean, first couple of chapters, the CISM review manual, one thing. Technical documentation about containers, completely different scenario if we're talking about accessibility to be able to read it. So what we wanted to do, because we're in the early stages, we've reviewed some of the stats and data that we've managed to get from different sources that have come from the government and also come from the CIISec, I can't remember the name of the survey that actually gets run on an annual basis. Professional survey. And contrasted that with, hopefully you guys all got the little invite to do the survey, the D&I survey, before you came along here today. So we're looking at what the industry stats look like versus what the stats look like today. And just thinking about that from a D&I lens and seeing what that actually looks like. So the overall one, this is from the Ipsos survey that we'll share all these links and sort of thing at some point later. But from the ethnicity perspective here, white people are effectively overrepresented in the industry. I don't think we would expect that to be any different, unfortunately. Come on to this a little bit more later. Sexual orientation, LGBTQ. According to the census, we're actually slightly overrepresented in the, LGBT are slightly overrepresented in the industry compared to the census data. The gender identity bit, I looked at this the first time I saw it and saw 60-30 split and thought that was actually pretty good. It looks pretty good until you look at it over here and realize that, so this is cyber sector workforce, senior cyber, digital sector workforce, and then all of UK, and what you can find is that we're actually much lower on the gender side of things than the rest of the workforce is. And this is around socioeconomic background and talks about 17% of people who've made it into the industry who came from a background where they got free school meals. So this is looking at social mobility side of things. And we'll touch on these a little bit more as we go through it. So for the next couple of slides, this is great. We didn't want to do death by PowerPoint, we found something worse. We're doing death by PowerPoint with stats. It's great. So this is the survey data that came from the Ipsos Murray CIISec surveys, and this, all for the next few slides, is the survey that we did before the event here. And what we can see is that, unfortunately, the proportion of people in the industry who are identifying as white is increasing rather than decreasing, and the event today at 85% white is pretty much on par with the worst situation we've seen so far in terms of the overall stats. We'll need to do something about how we address that, and that's the work stream that Durgesh is working through with this. The gender balance, we actually look pretty good today in comparison to some of the previous stats. So normally 85% male, 13% female, and we're looking at 75% male, 25% female today. So still a lot more to do, lots of stuff going on. Who's running the gender side of things for CIISec? I can't remember who it was.
Dr. Sarita, she's from IBM. Yeah.
Cool, perfect. So separate work stream for that we're also looking for people to get involved in. This is a really interesting one. So this is educational attainment. And going back to the first slide that I showed you that's got some stats on it, I'm talking about the free school meals bit. This is the one that I wanted to get to. In the sense that we all talk about the fact that we need people into entry-level positions within cybersecurity. We all talk about resource shortage. It's quite clear we've got it. It's been mentioned 3 or 4 times today so far. Most of the people that we've got in the industry from these stats, these are the last 7 years, undergrad and postgrad degree. We've got a group with no degree. It would be really interesting to get a cut of this with age against the education level. Because I'd suggest the group with no degree might be the older kind of cohort that found their way into security, having worked in technology beforehand. And this is the bracket that I certainly fall into. Now, the interesting bit about this is that when we talk about social mobility, we're talking about people entering the industry having come from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, probably in deprived areas, gone to less well-attaining schools. Fewer of them subsequently go to university and look for more vocational routes into the industry, like apprenticeships. And we're absolutely woeful at bringing in apprenticeship candidates into the cyber industry, and have been for the last 8 years. I had another thought on that one. Yeah, that was this. So when we talk about entry-level positions, how much of this is then also related to the fact that our entry-level positions look for certs, look for qualifications, and look for 5, 6, 7 years worth of experience in the cyber industry? So it begs the question, do we actually have entry-level positions that are going to help us deal specifically with this kind of social mobility piece? And again, it's a whole separate work stream that's going on. Disability, this is the one that I can talk a lot about myself. 13, it's very shiny, I can't see that. 13.8% of people in the survey said yes, they had a disability. And then we asked within the CIISec survey overall what that disability meant. Now the stats don't add up to 100%, we know that, it's because you could select multiple. But what we've discovered from that is that we've got largest cohort saying neurodivergent, next after that is physical disability, and next after that is mental health condition. We have a work stream for this, we have a work stream for this, we have a work stream for this. So we're identifying each of these separately and deliberately picking up neurodiversities as something that's separate from disability, because it's, if you have dyslexia, dyscalculia, if it's autism, it's not a disability, it's a neurodiversity, and we're treating it as such. It's something completely different. I won't go into the fact that you could say, yes, I have a disability, and then what type, the answer was none. One of the things I did want to call it is we definitely need some better stats on how this actually works. But the good thing about this graph here, so this is the survey that we ran before the event, and 75% of people said no disability, no neurodiversity, nothing to report. 75% not worried about them, we're worried about these ones, but if 75% said nothing, it means that 25% said they did have something, which means that 25% is a lot higher than 13.8%, so we seem to be in a position where people are happier and more open about disclosing, or we're better represented at this event than we have been before. This is the really interesting one. This is barriers that people may have encountered if they have a disability. And the 3 or 4 that are the most interesting, the 4 that we can really knock on the head quite easily: lack of confidence in my own ability, lack of support from my organisation, assumption on the basis from my organisation I lack the necessary skills, and a lack of training opportunities. These are things that we can deal with as leaders in the industry and can deal with fairly quickly, fairly easily. There's some around assumption, feeling that you weren't welcome in a particular clique or a particular culture. I think part of that's maybe down to the fact that as a security industry, we're seen as a little bit secretive, a little bit niche. People don't quite understand what's going on. There's maybe a misunderstanding as to how welcoming we actually all are, because I think we're a fairly nice bunch. But in general, there's very little for us to go on as we kind of start out down this journey. So as I said, we intended to come and talk about this in 6 months' time and talk about some of the great things that we've done. One of the things that we've learned from going through this is that we don't even have much of a baseline to start with. We're going to need to look a bit more detail at some surveys and some stats that we can get our hands on. KPMG recently did the survey on social mobility, which was announced, I think, back in November, and reported all the stuff that we expected to see in terms of difficulties from people from the lower socioeconomic backgrounds being able to move up through the progression chain within an organisation. And NCSC did the Decrypting Diversity paper around 3 or 4 months ago as well. But it looked at gender, neurodiversity, and social mobility as well. So while there's bits and pieces and pockets of good work that's actually happening, there are still big gaps in terms of what we would like to see and what we can use to take advantage and drive what we're doing in the future. That said, we have got some good ideas what we want to do. We've got some good plans, and Durgesh is going to take you through the next bit.
Thank you. Just get this on. Thank you, Grant, and thank you, Rory. Before I start and give you a flavor of what the Institute's plans are, what the vision is, how many of you have known the Chartered Institute of Information Security, or what was known as the IISP? Can I have a quick? Okay, we have a few here. How many of you agree or were expecting the stats that Grant talked about? Say, predominantly a white, middle-aged man. Right? Most of us. How many of you would like to improve that? So next time you're here, we would like to have those stats improved. All of us. So as Grant said, let's sign up, right? But yes, I encourage you to get involved as much as you can, and everybody has a part to play. Before I get again onto the vision, I would like to talk you through a video, and that sort of summarizes what we want to do as well.
Open. Open a door, and it opens all the others. Open a mind, and see what happens next. No great thing, no beautiful invention was created in a vacuum. It happens when we leave our comfort zone and come together. Embrace faiths, cultures, disabilities, differences. Embrace races, ages, ideologies, personalities, creating a tool or device nobody saw coming. Humanity is plural, not singular. The best way the world works is everybody in, nobody out. So who we're made of is everyone. Differences not just celebrated, but essential. Many more women in charge, equal pay for equal work, everywhere.
I believe you guys agree with what the video was talking about. It's not about a particular demographic. It's about the skills. And as they said, everybody in. We don't want to exclude that white middle-aged man. We want to get them along as well. But we want to increase the other demographics. Why? Not just because of culture, race, beliefs. It's about the skills. It's a diversity of skills. It leads to better productivity. And as a wise man has said, it's all about a self of belonging. We as humans thrive when there is a sense of belonging. And everybody in here would have experienced that. So at the back of that, what we have done is created a vision that we want to get everybody in, get them treated equally, fairly, no matter what your race, what's your culture, what's your sexual or identity, doesn't matter. It's all about your skill. We want to value, we want to feel respected, and get your true self into the community, into the organization. And obviously for the organizations, it's all about more productivity. Different thoughts is the outreach. So these are some characteristics of the diversity and inclusion that we are looking at. It's not an exclusive list, but these are some of the elements. And as Grant and Rory said, again, this is not an exhaustive list, but at the center of that, it's a center of its heart is inclusion by design. Doesn't matter who you are. Are you a woman? Do you have some sort of disability? Do you have mental health? Or do you come from a different culture? And Grant and myself are leading 2 of those work streams. There are others, but we want more of you. Doesn't matter, you don't have to be a member of the institute. You can just come along, bring your thoughts, contribute in any way, shape, or form. And how we want to do that is, first of all, we want to get that visibility of these diverse communities. Where are they? Are they hiding somewhere? We don't know. But at this stage, I don't see many of them here. You guys might have some disability, for example. Now that's hidden. We don't know. But unless we come forward, we won't know about it. And that's what we want to do. Again, here are 2 leading examples or 3 leading examples. We want to lead by examples, be the role models, inspire those individuals that, yes, don't hide behind the curtain. Come forward. If we can do it, we have crossed those barriers. And obviously, we will have come across various barriers in our careers, but we have reached to a certain extent. Same, you can do it as well. There's nothing stopping you guys. We would like to connect with diverse academics, universities, lower socio-economic sectors, as Grant said. It's across everywhere. We would like to influence, at the back of that, saying, how do we promote diversity and inclusivity? How do we increase that, not increase, but rather decrease that gap and make that change? Now, Prochaska and De Clemente have done a study. Now, that study talks about the change, the cycle of change. What's more important is the importance, the reason, the need for change. There's another element of, another aspect which talks about the confidence and the ability. If we focus on those 2 abilities and get them together, there's a readiness for change. And this is what we want to influence. We want to influence the readiness for change and get everyone on that journey. In 2 or 3 years' time, we want to, again, make that change, improve the stats. Not just for the sake of numbers, but to bring an added value. So we have, as Grant said, it's very early stages, but we have started on our plans. We have taken some steps. So if you see, we are in discussions with Ladies Hacking Society, which focuses on women in cyber. We're talking to Abbott Ecorta. Now, again, a region with a different demographics. There might be people from lower economic sectors. We're talking to Scottish borders. Now, again, a completely different set of demographics, where we have farmers. Now, farmers don't think they need cybersecurity, but they do. They use the platforms, right, where the information is. We are talking to Black and Scot, which is a Black professional Scottish community. Again, a different demographics. We are talking to professional bodies and training providers. We are talking to Disability Confident, the charity. How can we get people from that demographics? And what we want to do is build that into an individual's career progression right from early days. So Grant talked about Cyber EPQ, the membership. There are resources which the institute can support. And career development. So if you're doing through career, a change in career, we would like to support you there as well. Now, the institute has plans for across the country. but we are also forming what we call the CIISec Scottish Hub, which will focus on Scotland. So if there are opportunities, if you have any ideas across Scotland, across the country, anywhere, we would like you to come forward and contribute. We are talking to organizations, and as I said, these are still early careers, but we have one role model. We have a senior exec here who can actually, rather than me boosting to what we are doing, how well it has worked in an organization. So I'd like to bring back Rory, who will talk through how well it has worked within Tesco Bank, how they support, how Rory supports, and I'm proud to say we have a diversity and inclusivity sponsor who supports within the cyber sector. Over to you. Cheers.
So in Tesco Bank, I mean, it's fairly obvious I'm a middle-aged white guy. So what can I do? Really, my role is an enabler. If I want to see the change happen, I've got to be part of helping make that happen because I'm in a fairly privileged position. So I look after a range of teams across cyber risk, threat intelligence, did have security operations before I moved that to where it fits a bit better in with the SOC team. But one of the things that's key to us is we need the skills. We need to be effectively agnostic to who the individuals are as long as we can get people who provide good output that get us to a better place, that manage our risk appropriately. So in Tesco Bank, we've got some key streams, the Armed Forces Network, Enabled Network, LGBTQ+, and so on. And what we do as lead sponsors is ensure that they get time, they get availability, they get budget, they get a voice. And I think for most senior execs, this is something that needs to be done, because otherwise we can't, if we look at the balance across organisations, at senior positions it is still, it's usually skewed towards the older white males, if we look across most organisations in Britain. Now, at Tesco Bank and at Tesco as a whole, we're in a pretty positive position on that, where we have much greater diversity across genders, we've got much greater diversity across ethnicity. And the support for these networks helps grow that wider as well. So from a disability network position, we've got a voice at every event. We've got a voice that feeds into when we're making hiring decisions, when we're making decisions across products. Sure, financial industry is kind of driven a bit that way. We have a duty, the FCA demands certain things of us, but we can go over and above that because it's a good thing to do, it's the right thing to do. And you see the strapline there, building an inclusive workplace with a sense of belonging, led by inclusive leaders who value diverse talent in their teams. That's really where my perspective and those on Exco comes from. It works. It's something that we need to keep getting better at, but we're in a good place at Tesco Bank. So as an organisation, I think we're a positive role model. We're still happy to learn from other role model organisations as well. I think on that front, because we've got about 5 minutes left, it's probably an opportunity to open up for any questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Paul, as you're close enough, I will do that.
There's a lot of this that probably could be tackled at school level.
Yep.
So I'm just wondering appreciate this is still very early stages, but what kind of plans do we have to kind of start that at a school level? Because potentially at a university level, at that point it's potentially already too late. And a follow up, Grant talked about the cyber EPQ. Now, it's been a couple of months since I've kind of looked into it, but it seemed very aligned to an English educational system. So we talk about diversity and inclusion, but we've got a cyber EPQ that is aligned to kind of only one part of the country, and how do we look to tackle that?
Well, there's a couple of bits. So at an absolutely youngest age possible perspective, yes, there is the outreach. So the Institute also supports things like B-sides. The last B-side Scotland we ran, the youngest attendee was 8, I think, it might have been 7. And connecting with NCSC, connecting with Cyber Girls First, that is really grassroots level, but you're absolutely right, it's essential. Further up, Grant mentioned the apprenticeship schemes, that's where we need to make a difference at that point. So there's secondary schools, there's academia, and then there's apprenticeships, because there's those two routes. You can't just rely on schooling system and formal education taking you in. We've got to go, these people are going down a further education practical route they want to do. Some are coming through engineering. There's a million different routes into the industry. I've hired people who did music, biology. I always say I hired one guy because he was on fire and a stuntman. He understood risk really well, and he did incredibly well. Dougie, yep. You can come from anywhere, so we've got to make sure that we're not blocking off any routes. And Durgesh.
Yep. Just to answer your specific question on EPQ, so Grant and I are already in discussions with the institute and the academics how we align that EPQ to the Scottish academic system. So that's work in progress.
Yeah, the biggest challenge with that one at the moment is trying to find what they're calling an empty gap in the SQA's framework to slot it into. So there's already an NPA, National Progression Award, which comes out at the equivalent of HNC, HND. But the cyber EPQ needs to come at a level below that and fit in at high school level. So we're just working out how that sits. So. Yeah. Yeah.
I was just going to say that, interestingly enough, I was approached by a company called QA who does all of our in-house training about Scottish Government funding for the cybersecurity apprenticeship for either myself or my team. And discovered that in January that the SQA cybersecurity apprenticeship ended in December. At the end of December.
That's news.
When I did initially sign up for it, but withdrew because they screwed me around. But it was QA, not
Okay,
SQA.
that wasn't aware of that. That's quite interesting.
They could incorporate some of the cyber modules into another apprenticeship.
Yeah.
But they actually ended the cybersecurity apprenticeship.
The other thing that we're aware of is that the SQA itself is going to be disbanded at some point fairly soon as well, as I understand it.
Yep.
So yeah, there's an awful lot
SQA
of
is
stuff going on there. Yeah.
Restructured and renamed, if you like, but there's another similar organization which is called the Skills Development Scotland. So they run modern apprenticeships as well.
Okay.
So that's another area to look into. But there are various organizations which are funded by the government which look into apprenticeships.
Yeah. There's a whole set of work that needs to be done at the schools level to make sure that even careers advisors are made aware of the fact that this sort of career is an option that's there, because if you look at the Careers Advisory Service websites just now, I think the only thing I've seen there is DevSecOps as an option for cybersecurity, and everything else is missing from that. So we need to deal with a lot at that level. So.
Unfortunately, that is not officially
Yep.
advertised.
How do we get involved because your QR code doesn't work?
Oh, that's
It was tested, so
And asked us to buy it.
but that's just a website that takes you to the web page rather.
Right.
But
takes you to CIISec. There's a D&I link on the main menu on CIISec,
Yep.
which has got an email address that you can use to get in touch, and they'll put you in touch with the person
Yep.
leading the
or
stream.
even if you could share your contact details later on, we can. Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry, we are done, but we can catch up outside of. Sorry.
For those of us here, if we can have access to any training on the chat at the institute.
Absolutely, that's what I'm saying. You can have a chat later on.
Okay.
Thank you.